Hello, friends, and welcome to Define Your Personal Brand and Tell Your Story in 2021. My name is Eric Hulkran, and today I will be your host throughout the entire program. And what you'll learn are things like this: you should do before you begin to develop your resume, the importance of defining your purpose, selecting your positioning strategy, and moving forward with the promotion of your candidacy. Best practices in personal branding through the development of a powerful, keyword-rich resume that gets you traction and, more importantly, results. And how to use personal development strategies to help you gain confidence and professional maturity, which are two key things that are needed to land your ideal position. And make sure you stick around for your chance to win some excellent door prizes from our speakers today. Speaking of today, we're going to hear from two certified recruitment experts, Samantha Nolan and Juan Olivares Jr. Samantha Nolan is a certified professional resume writer and the owner of Nolan Branding, a full-service resume writing firm. She's also the author of the Dear Sam column that is featured on NJ.com, Cleveland.com, MLive.com, and all of our advanced local websites. Juan Olivares Jr. is the founder of ISI Leadership, a company dedicated to supporting new and emerging leaders with their personal growth. ISI Leadership also partners with young businesses in need of support with developing their leadership team. His group training and one-on-one coaching has helped numerous businesses. So if you're currently looking for a job, underemployed, or piecing together the gig economy jobs that are currently going on, get ready for what may be one of the biggest hiring surges on record. While jobs are not expected to fully recover to pre-COVID levels, the amount of projected hiring is going to set new records. So right now is the time to get ready and prepare, because economists are suggesting that hiring will begin slowly and somewhat mirror the rollout of the vaccines until it gains significant traction later in 2021. Now, to get us started, I want to let you know a little bit more about what Advance is and how you know us in your local markets. Advance's mission is to build the value of our company by the long term by fostering growth and innovation across a diversified portfolio that you can see here, which includes media, entertainment, communication, technology, education, and other promising sectors. I'm sure you recognize a lot of the logos that are in front of you right now. We're also hyper local with 24 newspapers, 9 #1 news and information websites, and the 3rd largest online news organization nationally, plus 700 awards and going for our journalism excellence. We also have the #1 reach in every market that we serve, and our publications have been in the communities for over 175 years. And here are just some of the newspapers that you interact with every day, both online and in person, that you might be familiar with. And before we get started, some housekeeping. If you have not done 645 million Zooms, that's okay. We'll be using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. So you simply go there, type your question, and that allows us to keep up on the questions. You can also use the chat function. If you forget, we will be watching both of those things, but make sure if you use the chat function, there's a drop-down menu that goes to panelists and all attendees, because if you don't change that, you'll literally just be talking to me for the entire time. Okay, let's get going. I am so excited to introduce our first speaker. I'm going to throw it over to Samantha Nolan to guide us through the program. Samantha, welcome. The floor is yours, and do your thing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And thank you, everybody, for attending to learn a little bit more about personal branding best practices. I am just going to share my screen here with you so that you can walk along with me as we talk about defining your brand in 2021. So the reason we're here is because we are probably looking for a new position, looking for a promotion, probably looking to represent ourselves to our highest potential on something called a resume. And obviously that content can then translate into other branding tools, such as your digital presence on LinkedIn. Now, I'm not going to be talking about the nuts and bolts of writing a resume. So what is in each section, what to include, what not to include, because the hard work of building your brand actually happens before you put pen to paper or fingers to keyboard. And that's what we're going to focus on, because if you do your due diligence and complete this thought process prior to developing your brand, you'll be a lot better positioned to develop a really, really keyword centric message that does gain traction when you put it out there in the market. So that's what we're going to focus on, what you do before you actually start to write your resume. Feel free, as Eric said, to ask questions in the Q&A channel, or to use the chat feature if you prefer. I will try and answer questions along the way if it's a good segue. If not, then I'll certainly try to get through as many questions as I can at the end. Of course, as always, if you're familiar with my Dear Sam column, you can email me at dearsam@nolanbranding.com with any of your job search or personal branding questions. So let's get started. We're talking about defining your brand because in the screening process, I'm sure you've all heard that it's ever so brief. We have done survey after survey, or the industry has, and often estimates come back that the screening process is even briefer than 4 to 7 seconds, if you can imagine that. So obviously, during that time, we really have to optimize the presentation to make sure that we are getting across our message to our target audience in as powerful and impactful a way as possible. So let's look a little bit about how to do that. And I define how we do that by looking at these 4 Ps: purpose, packaging, punch, and personality. We're going to look at purpose first. And purpose means, what is the purpose of your resume? What positions are you applying for? Are you going to be industry specific? What levels are you looking for? What titles are you seeking? You really have to do that due diligence before you put pen to paper, because if you don't understand what your target is, your audience will definitely not understand what you're positioning yourself for, and you're not going to seem like the most qualified candidate, or at least a candidate that won't be granted an interview. I receive a lot of calls and emails from individuals that say their primary target is to keep as many doors open as possible. And while I definitely understand why you would want to do that, closing as many of those doors as possible and leaving just 1 or 2 or a few at most open that are fairly well aligned with one another is actually a much better strategy to get traction in your search much more swiftly than you would if you build a general picture of your brand. So when you're looking at defining your purpose, I really want you to be asking yourself, what positions am I looking for? What are those titles that I'm going to be searching for? What does my application chronology look like? So when I go to Indeed.com, what am I searching? Am I searching based on keywords or specific titles? And when you do that, and we're going to talk about that in a minute when we look at the 3rd P of punch, you should have a really good sense of whether your purpose is narrowly defined enough. The more doors that you can close and only leave a select grouping, like I said, open, the much more successful your search will be, I promise. A lot of candidates have sort of the knee-jerk reaction of saying, well, I put my resume out there and it didn't get traction, so I'm going to fish with a bigger net. And that's actually the opposite of what you want to do. If your resume is out there for positions you feel qualified for, and by feel, I mean you've read the job postings and you can hear yourself and the functions that you've performed in your past positions in the positions you're applying for. And so you feel like you're fairly well qualified for those and you're not getting traction. I want you to re-look at your search and possibly re-engineer it so you can be even more targeted. So don't think about casting a bigger net. Think about changing the bait. So really making your resume as targeted as possible. Now, it doesn't mean that you may not need 2 different versions of your resume, but make sure that if you're applying for positions that are quite diverse, you take the time to create an alternate presentation of your brand, or do what I call retargeting. So sending a different message to that different audience that is going to have a completely different keyword set that they're looking for. Maybe it changes the way and the order in which you present your experience. So always be looking at your background through the lens of where you're going next. That's really, really important, and we're going to talk more about that. When we look at packaging, we're looking at multiple things. How long is your resume? What format your resume should be in? What other elements of packaging can you utilize to make your resume stand out? The first item we're going to talk about is different resume formats. And I'm going to go through these fairly quickly as we don't have a lot of time together today. So the three main formats that a resume can take is either the chronological or reverse chronological, the functional, and the combination. The chronological is the one probably most of you have. It starts with your current or most recent employer and works its way backward. It is the format that most hiring managers expect and prefer. Now, it doesn't allow you to hide things like recent job losses, frequent hops, limited related experience, possibly returning to something you did many years ago. So there are two other formats that might be prudent if that sounds more like your situation. The reason the chronological resume is the most popular is because it dots the I's and crosses the T's for the reader. So the reader will know that you performed X job at Y company during these years. And that's really what they're trying to understand. They're trying to understand your story. So that is why it's the most popular, because it's easy to understand your whole chronology of your professional career. The functional resume, instead of starting with your most recent position, instead presents your experiences by functional area. Now, these are typically subheadings of functional skills or functional experiences. And bullet point 1 could be something you did 20 years ago. Bullet point 2 could be something you do in your volunteer work. So there isn't a rhyme or reason as to the order in which you present these experiences, other than these experiences are presented in a way that qualifies you for what you want to do next. So it might leave out entire chunks of your experience if it's not relevant, because the functional resume focuses on relevance versus recency. Now, because hiring managers really like to dot those I's and cross those T's, it's not a liked format. Typically, there is some extra digging that takes place so the hiring manager can see what that potential disqualifier was that you were trying to hide, such as limited related experiences, like I mentioned, job gaps, job hops. So usually what I say is, unless, excuse me, you are not going to get your foot in the door any other way, then don't resort to the functional resume, because it is that disliked. Unfortunately, I do hear a lot of individuals that come to me and explore resume development and say, well, I wasn't getting traction with my traditional resume, so I must need a functional resume. And rarely is that the case. And I'm telling you, in my more than 10,000 resumes that I've written, I bet I've written less than 20 functional resumes in the past 18 years, because I know that unless that's the only way you're getting in the door, it is the format to be avoided. Now, that doesn't mean to say that you can't create a resume that focuses on relevant experience versus recent experience, and that would be the combination approach. So a combination resume is a little bit more of a sophisticated format. It's still opened with your qualification summary, but then it leads into some sort of highlights or related experience section. And you can order that experience however you like. You can present it by functional area, by employer, whatever works best for presenting your brand for what you want to do next. But the key to the combination format is, while that select highlights section focuses on relevant experience, you still give the hiring manager what they want to know, which is when you worked, where you worked, and what you did. So you still develop a full professional reverse chronological resume that follows that highlight section. So it's really a great format to use when you're pulling from maybe experiences that you did 10, 15, 20 years ago. I have a lot of clients that come to me that want to return to something they used to do, and presenting what they did yesterday isn't going to help them do that. So the combination resume really allows you to pull forward experiences without the context of when they occurred. There are no dates in that related experience or professional highlights section. Check out examples on my site if you need some more visuals for this particular format. When we also look at packaging, I'm just going to cover very quickly how long your resume should be. If I'm working with an entry-level client, then I might produce a one-page resume. That would make sense. And entry-level, I mean 5-7 years of experience. But certainly I've worked with many entry-level individuals that have a 2-page resume because maybe they have a couple of degrees, maybe they've held multiple internships, possibly they've been working since high school and all through college. Maybe they have a lot of awards or honors or community involvement that needs to be presented. So please don't get stuck in thinking that you only have 1 page to present your brand. For most professionals, your resume will be 2 pages. Now, it is true with that ever so brief screening process that only the top of page 1 is likely going to be screened or reviewed briefly, but it doesn't mean that the hiring manager won't review the rest of your resume once you're screened in. And in fact, arbitrarily cutting the length of your resume to this archaic 1-page rule, as some still profess, means that you're really damaging or dampening the keyword relevance you have the opportunity to create when your resume is going through an applicant tracking system that, quite frankly, doesn't care if your resume is 1 or 20 pages. It's just looking for keywords. It's not a human. It's not counting the pages. So don't make your resume overly long. Make sure it aligns with the experience you have. Professionals, a couple of pages. More senior level executives, 3 pages is absolutely fine. So please keep that in mind when building your resume. Other things you can do to make your resume stand out, things like font selection, not using the tired old Arial or Times New Roman. You can add images if you're a creative. You can put excerpts on your resume from LinkedIn recommendations, from your performance reviews. Think about that instant third-party credibility, references before the hiring managers had to even call your references. Those are incredibly popular with hiring managers because they really tell your story from a different perspective. So look back at some of that collateral and see if you have anything like that to add. And if not, perhaps go to LinkedIn and start requesting some strong recommendations. When we look at punch, the third P, it's really the most important P when matched with purpose. And punch just means keywords, or in marketing, we call this the hot button. So what are those keywords, those skills and experiences and qualifications and credentials that we need to have in our resume to be seen as a qualified candidate? Not only because a human being is going to be reading and expecting a certain language, but also because we have these things called applicant tracking systems, which are just computer algorithms searching for keywords and key phrases. Keywords are easy to spot. You can go to the newspaper or your online source for jobs and print out, I would say, a good 10 postings of interest and read those keywords. They pop out on the page. They really do. And you'll see this example I've gone through and kind of highlighted those keywords. And I'd really recommend you write those down. And I often tell people, write them down on the left side of a piece of paper. So all the way down the left side of a piece of paper, start writing these keywords that essentially you are saying, my audience wants to hear this in my resume in order for me to be seen as a qualified candidate. Now, if you've defined your purpose well enough, you're going to see some repetition in those keywords. And that's really important because that's going to give you a hierarchy of what to focus on. Now, just because we have that keyword on the left side of a piece of paper doesn't mean that we have that experience or credential. A lot of us are not perfectly qualified when we get the job. It's not always the most perfectly qualified person that gets the job, as we all know. So on the right side of that piece of paper, where your left side contains all of the desired skills and experiences and abilities, on the right side, I want you to transfer over what you have. So how do those keywords from your target audience and what they see as a qualified candidate translate to your brand? How can you tell your story in a keyword-centric way? And so pass over those keywords to the right side that represent you. Now, when you're writing your resume, you have this sort of cheat sheet of the language and the prioritization of messaging that you need to include. There are going to be things left on the left side of the page. Those are your potential disqualifiers. Those are areas that your target audience wants to see that you don't have. Now, that's really important to know for when you receive objections during your interview. You can craft scripts because you're prepared and you know competitively where you stand in terms of being seen as a qualified candidate. So I really, really encourage you to do this punch or keyword mapping exercise, as I call it. It will make sure that your purpose is clearly defined and possibly highlight when you need to close some additional doors or change that bait on your hook. When we look at our last P, we're looking at personality, things like word choices and different statements, and mostly about accomplishments. Now, I'm sure you've all heard your resume has to be full of accomplishments. We don't get our next job because we just went and did our last job. We get our next job because we are telling the hiring manager and the prospective employer that we will add value beyond the expectation. And that's what resumes focus on. Sorry, I forwarded too soon. Resumes should focus on explaining how you went above and beyond your job duties. So there's definitely a section on your resume that's a brief summary of your role, but then your bullets should be reserved for what we call CAR statements. So what were those challenges we faced? What were the actions we took? What were the results they produced? So your resume should definitely lean more toward accomplishments than responsibilities. If you don't know how to write accomplishment statements, please feel free to peruse my blog or any other personal branding resource that looks up to date. We're all talking about the importance of accomplishments. And in 2021, and having done this job for 18 plus years, I've yet to meet a client without accomplishments to highlight. So even if you're sitting there thinking, all I did was my job every day, I guarantee you there are things you should still highlight. And that's how you add that personality to your resume. You predict the value that you are going to give to that potential employer. And I'll look at your questions in a moment, but I hope that just by going through some simple 4 Ps, that when you leave this 30-minute webinar today, you really understand, wow, I didn't realize I had to define my purpose. I have to know what I want in order to tell the right story to my target audience. So I want you to own that and make sure that you're sending a refined enough message and validating that by performing that keyword mapping exercise so that you can really reinforce that you know what language you're speaking through the presentation of your brand, and you're really storytelling in a strategic way that positions you for what you want to do next. I really hope that helps everybody. Let me take a look at your questions. So yes, having a second resume will definitely impact how any online presence is. You're going to have to create some sort of hybrid. You're going to have to merge the messaging. We can only have one LinkedIn profile. So really the most successful searches, like I said, are the ones that are most targeted. So unless there's just a compelling reason why you need to present your brand very differently in a second presentation of your resume, then I would recommend you do one job search. One job search is hard enough. If you are putting your brand out there, if you are spending 15 to 30 minutes on LinkedIn every day, if you're networking, if you're approaching target employers and telling them of your interest, if you're accessing your network and telling them of your interest and what you're looking for, and you're working right now, that search needs to be the only search you're doing. If you're conducting 2 searches, you're potentially weakening the impact of each of them. The next question is, how do you handle your title on your resume if your current role is at the director? However, you're looking at manager or senior consultant. Do you omit the director title? Do they check this? Yes, that can be checked during a background screening. So they will likely call your past employer and verify the title and the dates that you worked there. So what I would make sure you do is within the qualification summary, You really make sure that you're positioning yourself for what you want next. So you can open the qualification summary with something like, senior level manager / senior consultant. So you're immediately sort of positioning your brand in the minds of the reader. So they're not leading off knowing that you're a director and they just see that within the professional experience section. Very rarely do people only position themselves for exactly what they've been. That is the purpose of the qualification summary, is to allow your messaging to resonate with your target audience based on what is most relevant about your candidacy. With the punch or keyword mapping exercise, I won't go over it again because I only have a couple minutes before your next speaker presents. But if you need that, I have it written up. You're welcome to email me at the address you see on my screen, the dearsam@nolanbranding.com. You're welcome to send your resume to be entered into our door prize of a full resume critique done by me. And at the same time, you're more than welcome to say you'd like a copy of my keyword mapping exercise, and I can send that PDF off to you right away. That's no problem. The cover letter, very valuable. I often liken the cover letter to a jacket on a suit. It's great to show up in your slacks and shoes and socks and belt and shirt and tie, but you will have some people that say, wish you would have worn a jacket. The cover letter allows you to expand on your message, allows you to tell your story in a more narrative way. So to me, anyone conducting a professional search should be partnering their resume with a cover letter. About half of your audience reads cover letters, half of them will never read it, no matter if you have flashing lights on it. So you really are appealing just to the 50% of people that are identifying themselves as cover letter readers. So why not extend your screening time by giving them something that they're actually going to read? I'm sorry that I didn't get to the other questions. Feel free to email me your questions. Just like always, I respond to every single Dear Sam email I get. So even if you haven't read my column, if you're from a different market, please feel free to email me. Happy to answer any questions that come my way, but I want to be respectful of Juan, who is up next to speak to you guys about personal and professional development. And thank you so much for your attention. I know I had to speak fast to get the most in 30 minutes, but I hope it was helpful. Have a great day.
Thank you, Samantha. And as Samantha just said, let's bring in Juan Olivares Jr., and he can take over from here. Juan?
All right, can you see me? All right, there we are. I was having a little bit of a technical difficulties, but I think I'm on now. So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Juan Olivares. And as you heard there, I'm here to chat with you a little bit about the personal development space. But before we get started, I just want to share a little bit more about me, just so that you know who you're speaking to. I live in Michigan with my wife and daughter. I'm a United States Army veteran, so I do have some military experience behind me. And for 10 years after my military career, I was privileged or fortunate enough to work for some great companies in both Michigan and Florida. And so I ended up here in Michigan. And a little over a year ago, I committed to pursuing my dreams of helping people develop in their personal and professional lives. And I do that as a coach and speaker. So that's just wanted to share a little bit more about me. And before I forget, I want to just let Sam know that I think she did a great job. Everything, I'm confident that everything she shared is going to make us better prepared as we go out and look for jobs. So great job. If you agree with that, can you do Sam a favor and just let her know that? Send her a chat. I know we got several questions for her, but send her a chat and let her know that she did a great job. I know that personally, I feel like she did an excellent job. So let her know you appreciate her. And while you're doing that, what I want to do is I want to let you know what we're going to chat about over the next 15 or 20 minutes. And to let you know that I'm speaking to the right group. As I understand it, all of you, if not most of you, are looking for a job or in some kind of career transition. Well, good news. I've been through those situations myself, so I get you. In fact, here's probably what you're thinking. You want the perfect job with the perfect compensation. You want the perfect location with the perfect people. And we need it tomorrow. You need the job tomorrow. And if it comes with an office, well, that makes it even better. Does that sound accurate? I'm sure it does. Well, admittedly, there's a lot of topics we could cover. So where do we start? I thought about sharing my personal experiences with the hiring process. I've personally been recruited, so I understand the pros and cons of that. I've had to grind it out. I've had to look for jobs. I've had to get in there and really dig deep. But while I think we'd understand each other and we might even laugh about some of the stories, I wanted to add more value during our time together. So then I wondered, all right, do I share all of the insider secrets I picked up while working in the recruitment space? But then I realized there aren't any secrets. And you should know there aren't any secrets. I did, however, learn a lot about my time while working with recruiters, but it'd take us probably a couple of months to work through all that. So here's what I did. I decided that I'm going to share 2 personal development principles that I think will not only help you in your job search, but that I believe have the ability to help you in your personal life. Simply put, I believe these principles equip you to create momentum that always favors you. However, these principles aren't self-activated. We can't ask Alexa to figure it out for us. It's going to require that you show up and participate. The first principle is going to challenge you to reconsider how you start the job search. The second principle is going to add fuel to help create the momentum towards the things you want in life, in this case, your job. So let's jump into it. The first principle is that everything starts with you, no exception. Now, on the surface, I can see where some of you might say, well, that's just common sense. Of course, everything starts with me. But I think there's a danger in saying that. When we simply label as something as common sense, we forget one big thing. Common sense doesn't equal common practice. And that's where the problem lies. You need to have a common practice behind the discipline of knowing who you are and what you want, right? The practice or doing of something will outperform the knowing of something every day. If that weren't the case, we could all go out tonight, buy a couple books, read them, and then we'd wake up rich and happy, right? But it doesn't work that way. Similarly speaking, if you have knowledge or common sense that everything starts with you, but you lack a disciplined practice behind it, rich and happy will elude you in all areas of your life, right? And when I say rich, I'm not just talking about money. There's a lot of areas in our life that need some happiness, that need some richness, especially after the year we've had now, right? So it's critically important that if you're going to set yourself apart from everyone else looking for that perfect job, you have to do it by improving self-knowledge. Here's the truth. The majority of people do what everyone else is already doing. They listen to conventional wisdom and they follow established norms. I'm sure you've seen them or you've heard of them. They're not you guys, but you've heard of them. These are the ones that immediately start scouring through job postings. They visit countless websites. They update their resume with the latest buzzwords. They research companies, start attempting to memorize, vision statements, mission statements. You get the picture. I mean, there's just a lot of work, and some of that needs to be done. I get it, right? But it doesn't have to start there. And I personally don't think it should start there. I think there's something that needs to be done before. Because when you start in that direction, when you start by asking what your family and friends think, asking what the experts online say, you dilute yourself. You dilute yourself in the sense that you go to the marketplace with the information that you've put in from everybody else except yourself, right? And so that everybody gets my understanding or my expression of dilution, I wrote the definition down because I want to make sure you get this, right? So Oxford describes dilution as this: made weaker in force, content, or by value modification. To me, that sets us up perfectly, right? Because if you look at those things, if you go and you listen to all the experts' advice and they tell you what to say, how to say it, when to say it, you really weaken your force because you mute your voice. You need to show up. Take some of those things that people are saying to you, but make sure that it fits you. As Sam mentioned just a couple of ago, it's good to have multiple versions of your resume, but you don't want to have 20 resumes. You dilute the content. You start to lose who you are. You apply to multiple companies, companies, telling each one of them that your mission or their mission is your mission, their purpose is your purpose, your values or their values or your values. All of those add up to dilution of your content, value modification, and it really leads to misalignment and to disappointment, regardless if you get the job or not. right? You could get the job and be disappointed just as well as you are. Don't get the job and you're disappointed. So you're obviously here to figure out, how do we fix that, right? You commit to pursuing to a deeper understanding of who you are so that you put yourself in a position to win every time. When you fully understand that everything starts with you, you will lead yourself through situations a lot differently. Not just the recruiting process, not the hiring process. I mean, this is life. You'll start to use strategies that align with your strengths, right? This is how it'll show up in your life. You'll become present, right? You need to be present. You're like, well, what? That's another one of those common sense things. Yeah, of course I'm present, but what does that mean? It means you're present in your preparation. You take it serious. You understand that, as Sam mentioned, that there are going to be things that align with you and don't align with you. You need to be present in your preparation. That's where it starts. That's what leads to clarity. You need to be present in your conversations, right? You're going to be speaking to a lot of people, right? And it could just be a lot of information. But when you start from a place of knowing who you are, what happens in those conversations, when you're finally present, when you finally have prepared, you start to hear things that resonate with you. You start to find things that don't resonate with you, and you know when to walk away. Two of the most important things that I think you'll discover during this time is your identity and your purpose. And when that happens, when you start to know who you are, your identity, and that you're operating from your purpose, you start to gain confidence. The experience itself will reveal things to you that you needed to know about you before you started your job search. You understand what's important to you and what's not. And because you've gained a command of who you are, you just flow differently. You flow differently through life, through the hiring process. You have a deep knowing that things are going to turn out okay for you. So even if you get passed up for a job, you're okay with it because you're confident that in that situation, everything worked out for your best. You know that the job that was meant for you is right around the corner. All right. That, my friends, is a place you want to experience for yourselves. And it starts with getting to know who you are. There's a key component to the discipline I just mentioned to you. And I think I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it. The real reason this principle of knowing who you are and that everything starts with you, the reason that principle works is because of the fact that every relationship that you have is a direct reflection of the relationship you have with yourself. So if you know who you are, you're confident in who you are, you know that you're communicating properly. The interactions with the hiring manager, the interactions with the recruiter will come naturally to you. It won't be forced. The second principle is ownership. By that I mean taking full responsibility of anything that moves in and through your life, and that you maintain at least some level of control over, right? If it's something you can't control, obviously you don't, but if you have any slither of control over it, I want you to own it, right? And again, I'll use a definition to kind of describe where I'm going to, and ownership is defined as the state, relation, or fact of being an owner. Also the rights or interest of an owner. Again, I think this definition does a great job of setting me up here. And that is, when it comes to the hiring process, too many of us give up on our interest. And we do it easily. We start to accept jobs we really didn't think that we qualified for, that we even wanted. We start to take compensation that we know that's not fair. Basically, we just give up on our interest, and we willingly get pulled through the process, and we settle. We hope for the best, but we settle. We settle for things that are less than what we deserve. All right? We become too comfortable with other people defining our experience. While this applies to every aspect of the hiring process, we're going to narrow it down for a quick second, just so that I can demonstrate what I'm trying to say here. So we'll focus on the interview process. So in the interview process, it really comes down to experiences. You want to put yourself in the best position to either be invited back or to be hired, right? Regardless of what you might hear, hiring decisions are largely made on the experiences that are created between the candidate and the company stakeholders. Next slide, please. That is not to say that basic requirements aren't overlooked or that are overlooked. I mean, they obviously have to, all the legalities, all those requirements are gonna have to be met. But once those requirements have been met, hiring managers and recruiters rely heavily on the experience that was created throughout the screening and interview process. They refer back to that experience, the relationship, even as briefly as it was, to make their hiring decisions. They reflect back on that. And when I was in my time in the recruiting space, very rarely did I hear, when you finally sat down for that last decision making, or rarely did I hear somebody had all the qualifications. That's a given. That you expect that when you're interviewing someone. You expect that when someone's applied to the job, right? So you revert or you default back to something, and to me, it's the biggest thing, and that's the experience or the relationship that you've created throughout that process. Here's the challenge I have with that situation though. And that is that while I was in the recruiting space, one of the most common complaints I used to hear from recruiters, hiring managers, and candidates alike was that they all felt they had a poor recruiting experience. On the candidate side, they felt like recruiters did a poor job of providing quality information about the job. They felt like the recruiters weren't engaged, right? Beyond a few general questions. Recruiters and hiring managers felt like candidates weren't prepared, or that they showed little interest or about the information that was shared with them. It just kind of just going with the flow. Well, that's a big problem if you're trying to get hired, or it's a big problem if you've got a critical role to fill as a hiring manager. So who's responsible for making sure that we address this? Well, based on the principle I just shared with you, you are. I want you to take ownership of that. How do you do that? You start to think about the experience that you want to create. Now, listen, as I mentioned earlier, I get that there are things you can't control, but the focus, or where I want you to put your focus on, is think about those things that you can control. Because let's face it, something you can't control just gives you uncertainty. It puts you behind the curve. You're constantly trying to figure things out. So start from a place of knowing. Be confident in what you're doing, right? So how do you make that happen? Well, the first thing is you got to prepare. And Sam mentioned that just a little bit ago, right? This is one of those in other areas that you kind of go, it's a common sense thing, but rarely does it ever happen. To add a little bit of context of what I mean by that, I like to say this: prepare for the worst and lead with your best. Now, what does that mean, right? I can think of some of the worst situations that I've been in trying to get a job, being recruited, looking for a job. Well, I want to prepare from that place, right? So how do you do that? You start by defining the experience that you want to create. Here's what I do. As I mentioned earlier, I take the worst situation I have. And for me, I'm just going to share my personal thing. To me, the worst situation is I get in a position where I've not been afforded the opportunity to share with someone the best me, that puts me in the best light for them to consider me for that role. That's the worst thing I can do. And one of the ways that we see that is when recruiters don't engage you, right? You've all experienced them. Well, you've got to prepare to experience that. You've got to prepare to, how do I make sure that even though I'm not being engaged, how do I ensure that I'm leaving them with the information that they need? So that's what I would do. Prepare from that place. You want to be present, all right? Again, sounds common sense, but I've seen so many people rush through this process. They immediately jump into the things that we discussed earlier, right? And then there's the mindset. Anything less than a growth mindset, a positive mindset, minimizes your chance of presenting yourself in the way that you want, right? If your mindset is that I just need a job and anything will do, you'll get a job and anything will do. If your mindset is that this experience that you're going through is going to result in you getting the job that you want, you'll get the job you want, right? Things will start to resonate with you, right? Another thing you can do is to learn to share your experiences with a focus on soft or non-cognitive skills. Earlier, we mentioned a resume and all that. That's where all the things are that you definitely need. But some of the things that recruiters look for are some of the soft skills or non-cognitive skills, right? And you might ask, what are those, right? Here's a few examples. You want to include things as your persistence. You want to include things when you're describing your story as, through your self-discipline, your focus, your confidence, the teamwork that happened while you were leading people or that you were operating. You want to show that you can stay on task. And the best way to do that is to simply tell your story. And you'll know that by stopping by principle number one, which is getting to know yourself, right? If anyone is equipped to tell your story, it's you. You can't get it wrong. Ensure that at every step of the hiring process, you are providing the company, the recruiter, the hiring manager with everything that they need to know about you to make the best possible hiring decision about you. And there's a benefit to this process, right? You only got to prepare once. If you just take the time to prepare up front, you own it up front, you only need to prepare once. Yeah, you'll need to make some slight modifications for different, various companies, but they'll be minimal as opposed to the various resumes, the various, values and purposes and missions that you say you align to. Keep this in mind as we come to an end. At the end of the day, both you and the recruiter want you to be the one. They want you to be the one. That's a mindset you need to go into it. They don't want to go back to their desk and have to sift through 100 resumes. They don't want to have to go back and make 50 other calls. They want you to be the one. The manager wants you to be the one. Position yourself by taking ownership. Position yourself by knowing who you are. Position yourself to win every single time. All right? To help you achieve that result, here it is simply. Ownership is one of the most important factors that will determine whether you succeed or fail in your job search. And we made some time for Q&A, so we'll take a look here. There's nothing specific about what I discussed. I don't know. I think it looks like we still have some questions for Sam, but here's what I'd like to do if there's no questions. And this is to help us out, if you don't mind, or at least help me out, I'll say, because I like gathering information. If you don't have a question, I have a question for you. Reflecting on the experience over the last couple of days, or your time here today, what's been the best takeaway so far? All right, let us know in the chat box. And also, what's the topic you wish that would have been covered, but hasn't been covered up to this point? Let us know about that too. We want to make sure that we get you the help or the information that you need. And then let me leave you with this. You can make this happen. I know you can. I got confidence in you. Things will work out for you. Now let's go make it happen.
Thank you, Juan. We do have one question that I want you to stick around for a second. Elaine asked, how do we stay positive when we get rejection after rejection? So it's not going the way that they want it to go.
Yeah. Wow, that's a question that really takes a lot of diving into, but I'll just give you what I think. Rejection after rejection, that's not an uncommon story, right? We get that. But the way you stay positive, to me, is, again, operating from who you are. What you have to understand that is every rejection puts you closer to where you want to be at. So the way you stay negative is you focus on the rejection. The way you stay negative is you focus on what you don't have. The way you stay negative is by focusing on why you didn't get the job. You want to stay positive, so it requires a different set of questions to yourself. So to me, here are the questions that I would ask myself if I wanted to stay positive. And that is, did I learn something about myself going through the process? Well, yeah, I learned ABC. Did I maybe miss something? Did I hear something in the interview? Did I see something at the company while I was there that maybe put something, put a question mark on? Those are all things you have to, you're like a heat-seeking missile. You're trying to get to a job, but at the same time, you're constantly receiving information to get you to that point. Look at that feedback as something to keep you on course so that you can finally hit your target.
Awesome. Thank you, sir. Have a wonderful afternoon. And as I said at the beginning, there's some awesome door prizes that you guys can score right now. And so what Juan is giving is 2 free 1-hour personal development coaching. That's one of the door prizes. And then he's also giving a free copy of his book, The Buddha and the Badass, The Secret Spiritual Art of Succeeding at Work. In order to enter to win one of those 2 things, it's Juan at juanolivaresjr.com. That's Juan at juanolivaresjr.com. Now, for Samantha, she is doing a resume critique from Sam herself. So what you need to do is email her if you want her to audit your resume. It's dearsam@nolanbranding.com. That's dearsam@nolanbranding.com. So enter either one of those and they will get back to you this afternoon and you can get on with your job search. And we wish you well with that. Remember, you can visit our online job fairs where you can find companies that are currently hiring in your local markets. You can see the websites in the chat as we speak. So friends, I hope you got something out of this. It is so great to see you at the very least virtually. Have a wonderful afternoon, a wonderful weekend, and we will talk to you again soon. Cheers.